Why Employees Build Wealth for Others, Not Themselves, full audiobook. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Security. You were told from the very beginning that a job was safety. From the moment you walked into a classroom as a child, you were being trained to believe that if you studied hard, obeyed the rules, and earned good grades, you would one day land a secure position. That position would provide you with a steady paycheck, predictable hours, and benefits that would protect you from life storms. The system whispered to you that all you had to do was follow the path laid out before you, and you would be taken care of. That whisper became a chant, and that chant became your truth. But the truth was never yours. It belonged to someone else. The illusion of security is one of the greatest deceptions in modern society. You imagine that because you have a contract with a company, you are safe. You imagine that because your paycheck arrives every 2 weeks, you are protected. Yet that paycheck is a leash. It ties you to a structure that benefits others far more than it ever benefits you. When you receive $2,000 every month, you celebrate stability. What you do not see is that the person who pays you that salary makes 10 times that amount from your work. Your effort, your ideas, your sweat are transformed into profits that never reach your hands. And because the money arrives in regular intervals, you mistake consistency for safety. Think of a man named Daniel. He worked for 15 years at a manufacturing plant. He was praised for his discipline, never missed a day of work, and always arrived before sunrise. He believed he had built a fortress of stability. Every month, his account showed $2,500. His wife, Julia, managed the bills with precision, making sure nothing was late. They lived with the comfort of predictability, believing that this was the prize of responsible living. Then one morning, Daniel was called into the office. The plant was downsizing. His position was eliminated. In one meeting, the fortress he believed in dissolved into air. The illusion shattered. He discovered that what he thought of as stability was, in truth, fragile dependency. You must see that the security of employment is a story designed to keep you compliant. Companies cannot promise you permanence because markets change, owners shift, and costs must be cut. They will let you go the moment numbers demand it, no matter how many years you gave them. And yet, you build your life around this fragile foundation as if it were eternal. That is the illusion, believing that stability comes in the hand of someone else, rather than from the wealth you create and control yourself. The irony is sharp. You labor under the belief that the company protects you, but in reality, it is you who protects the company. It is your effort that keeps the doors open, your skill that fuels the profit, your time that sustains the machine. Without you, there is no product, no service, no transaction. Yet when the time comes to distribute the wealth, you are given only a fraction, dressed as security. This is not safety. It is dependency disguised as stability. Let us take another example. Imagine a hotel where 100 employees each earn $2,000 per month. That is $200,000 in wages. The hotel charges guests an average of $150 per night, and with 200 rooms at 70% occupancy, it generates over $600,000 per month in revenue. After costs, management and owners keep nearly $200,000 in profit. Notice what happened. The combined effort of 100 people produced wealth that went straight to the top. Those who worked the hardest, housekeepers scrubbing floors, cooks sweating in the kitchen, receptionists smiling at rude guests, received the smallest share. The people at the top reaped the rewards, while the employees clung to their paychecks like lifeboats, believing they were safe because money came on time. This is how the illusion of security is built. When you rely on a paycheck, you surrender control of your future. You cannot decide when or how your pay grows. You cannot dictate how long the position lasts, and you cannot claim ownership over the results of your labor. You are left to hope, to trust, to believe in promises that may vanish overnight. And because the system has trained you to fear instability, you cling to the paycheck as though it were your only anchor. But anchors can drag you down as easily as they can hold you steady. The greatest trick is that this illusion does not even feel like a trick. It feels normal. You are surrounded by others who live the same way. They talk about promotions, about raises, about retirement plans, as though these things will deliver freedom. But promotions are crumbs compared to the banquet owners enjoy. Raises are designed to barely outpace inflation, ensuring you never truly gain ground. Retirement plans are promises that may never materialize, dependent on markets you cannot control. You see your peers living the same story, and you convince yourself it must be true. That is how illusions survive, through repetition and collective belief. Consider Maria, who worked as a nurse for 25 years. She earned $3,000 a month. Her dedication saved lives, yet she never once owned part of the hospital she served. Each year, administrators earned bonuses in the tens of thousands, while Maria's salary inched upward just enough to cover rising expenses. By the time she retired, she had traded more than half her life for a steady paycheck that barely left room for savings. She had been secure, yes, but secure in building someone else's empire. The illusion had cost her freedom. Security, real security, does not come from dependency. It comes from ownership. It comes from assets that generate wealth whether or not you wake up at 5 in the morning to punch a clock. It comes from creating streams of income that no employer can take away. The paycheck keeps you alive, but it does not make you free. And freedom, not consistency, is a true foundation of wealth. The first step is recognizing that the illusion exists. You cannot break free from something you cannot see. Once you see that the promise of job security is designed to benefit the one who pays you rather than you yourself, you begin to loosen the chains. You begin to question why you should devote decades to something that can vanish in a moment. And when you ask those questions, you begin to move closer to truth. The illusion fades, and what remains is clarity. Your labor has always been more valuable than the paycheck you received. And yet, you may still feel resistance. You may think, but I need the paycheck. I need the benefits. I cannot risk instability. That thought is exactly what keeps the illusion alive. Fear of instability is the most powerful tool used against you. It makes you settle, accept less, and believe that small certainties are better than great possibilities. Fear blinds you to the fact that the real instability lies in trusting your future to the decisions of others. When you understand this, you stop mistaking a regular paycheck for safety. You start to see it for what it is, dependence wrapped in comfort. The illusion of security is powerful because it offers short-term peace at the cost of long-term freedom. Like a warm blanket on a cold night, it soothes you, but it also keeps you asleep. The question is not whether the paycheck feels good. It does. The question is whether you want to keep sleeping through your life or wake up to the truth of where real wealth comes from. And that choice is yours, though the world around you will try to persuade you otherwise. You have seen how the illusion of security holds people captive. Yet it is not only the paycheck that deceives you. It is the rituals, the benefits, and the promises woven into employment that make the cage feel like a home. Health insurance, retirement plans, paid vacations. All of these are presented as gifts from the employer. But look closer, and you will see there are chains polished to look like jewelry. They are designed not to empower you, but to keep you dependent, ensuring that you hesitate before ever considering life beyond the company walls. Think of the worker who stays at a job he despises simply because he fears losing his health care coverage. He wakes up every morning filled with dread, but he convinces himself it is better than facing uncertainty. That fear is the glue of the illusion. The employer understands this, and so long as the illusion is strong enough, the worker will remain obedient. He will trade his dreams for dental checkups, his ambitions for annual leave. What is disguised as generosity is, in truth, leverage. You may even tell yourself that staying is the responsible thing to do. You have bills, children, obligations. You cannot afford to take risks. But pause and consider this. Is it more responsible to hand over the fate of your family to an employer who can discard you in a single afternoon? Or is it more responsible to build something that no one can take away from you? Responsibility is not obedience. True responsibility is ownership. Ownership of your choices, your time, and your wealth. Let us follow the story of Anthony, a man who worked for 2 decades at a logistics company. He earned $3,000 a month, enough to keep a modest home and raise 2 children. Each December, he received a small bonus of $1,000. Anthony told himself this was proof of his value. He ignored the fact that his division brought in over $10 million in annual revenue, and that executives took home 6-figure bonuses. He convinced himself that as long as the checks cleared and the benefits remained, he was safe. But when the company merged with a larger competitor, his position was declared redundant. He received a severance package equal to 3 months of salary. 20 years of loyalty reduced to $9,000 and a farewell lunch. The illusion had ended, and he was left with nothing that could sustain him beyond the short term. This is a reality. Security of employment ends the moment it is no longer convenient for the employer. The benefits you depend on vanish when the contract ends. The retirement plan you dreamed of shrinks if the market falters. The job you thought was permanent disappears when profits demand it. And yet, you are told be grateful, to feel lucky, to see this as the pinnacle of stability. Gratitude is noble, but when misplaced, it is a chain. Another piece of the illusion is the idea of the career ladder. You are told that if you work hard, remain loyal, and prove yourself, you will climb upward into better positions, higher salaries, and greater respect. But the ladder is not infinite. It narrows as it rises, and most people remain stuck on the lower rungs. Imagine a company of 1,000 employees where only 10 will ever reach the executive level. 990 remain below, climbing slowly, competing against each other for incremental raises. The structure ensures that only a handful taste wealth, while the rest provide the labor that supports them. The ladder is not a path to freedom. It is a funnel that channels most people into stagnation while justifying the success of a few. You must also understand how the illusion is reinforced by society itself. Families tell their children to get a good job, believing it is a safe route. Governments encourage employment because it produces taxes and stability. Schools train students to become employees rather than owners. Every message around you repeats the same narrative. Employment equals safety. To question this is to challenge tradition, to push against the expectations of everyone around you. And that pressure keeps many from ever daring to step outside the cage. Let me share with you the story of Linda. She was the first in her family to attend college. Her parents celebrated when she landed a corporate position with a salary of $4,000 a month. They told her she was set for life. For years, Linda lived with the pride of meeting expectations. She leased a new car, signed a mortgage, and enjoyed weekends at restaurants. But beneath the surface, she felt restless. She noticed how every raise was swallowed by rising costs, how her debt never seemed to shrink, how promotions were slow and political. When the company reorganized, Linda was moved to a new department without choice. Her workload doubled, and her hours stretched longer. Her family still congratulated her on security. Yet Linda felt trapped. The illusion was clear. She had traded freedom for approval, but the safety she had been promised was hollow. Numbers can tell the story as clearly as any anecdote. Consider a worker who earns $40,000 a year for 30 years. Over the course of that career, she will have earned $1,200,000. That seems large until you realize it is spread across 3 decades, consumed by living costs, taxes, and debt. Now consider the owner of the company, whose net profit each year is $2 million. In a single year, he earns nearly double what the worker makes in a lifetime. The worker believes in the security of her paycheck, while the owner builds generational wealth. The illusion blinds her to the scale of imbalance. The truth is that employment was never designed to make you wealthy. It was designed to make you useful. You provide stability for the company, not the other way around. The company's goal is not to secure your future, but to secure its own. The benefits and paychecks are tools to keep you loyal, to keep you producing, to keep you from leaving. They are not proof of safety. They are evidence of control. To escape the illusion, you must first accept the discomfort of uncertainty. It is easier to believe in the paycheck than to face the unknown. But growth lives in the unknown. Wealth lives in the space where you take risks, create ownership, and accept responsibility for outcomes. The paycheck may feel steady, but it is a ceiling as much as it is a floor. Once you see that, you stop mistaking it for freedom. The illusion of security has trapped generations. Parents handed it to children like an inheritance, believing they were giving them safety. But what they handed down was dependency. The real inheritance you must seek is not a steady job, but the ability to create wealth on your own terms. That is where safety truly lies. not in the promise of another, but in the strength of what you own, what you build, and what cannot be taken away when the next meeting strips you of a title. Chapter 2. The Price of Obedience. You were taught that obedience was the key to advancement. Do what you are told, show up on time, follow the rules, and eventually you will be rewarded. The promise sounded simple, almost moral. Loyalty brings prosperity. But in reality, obedience often costs you more than it pays. Each time you bow to orders without question, you trade a piece of your freedom, your creativity, and your potential. And the reward you imagine is never as grand as the price you silently pay. Obedience feels safe because it removes responsibility. When you follow the rules of your employer, you no longer need to think for yourself. Decisions are made for you, paths are laid out, yet the safety is deceptive. By surrendering your independence, you become easy to control. You are no longer the architect of your life. You are a piece on someone else's chessboard, moved according to their strategy, not yours. The illusion tells you that obedience protects you, when in truth it strips you of power. Consider a young man named Samuel. After finishing his studies, he joined a large corporation. He was ambitious, but he quickly learned that his ambition had to be expressed within strict boundaries. He stayed late when asked, took on projects that drained him, and remained silent when decisions seemed unfair. He obeyed, believing that one day his loyalty would be rewarded with a promotion. 10 years later, Samuel was earning only marginally more than when he had started. The promises of advancement had been delayed year after year. His obedience had made him dependable but invisible. He had followed the rules so faithfully that he was no longer seen as a leader, only as a tool. His obedience cost him his voice, and with it, the wealth he might have created had he dared to question, to resist, to lead. Obedience comes with a hidden tax, the tax of time. Every year you spend waiting for recognition is a year you could have spent building for yourself. Imagine that Samuel had instead taken the courage to start something of his own. Even if he had failed once or twice, he might have built ownership by his 30s. Instead, by following the rules, he arrived in middle age with nothing more than a plaque on his desk and a paycheck that barely kept pace with inflation. His obedience was expensive. The cost was opportunity. The corporate ladder feeds on obedience. You are told that if you prove yourself at the bottom, you will be allowed to climb higher. But the ladder narrows as it rises, and most people are left waiting on the lower rungs, holding on to obedience as if it were virtue. The truth is that promotions are less about loyalty and more about politics, timing, and luck. For every one person rewarded, dozens remain overlooked, still waiting for recognition that never arrives. And while they wait, their years slip away. Let us bring numbers into this picture. Suppose an employee earns $45,000 a year. He works for 30 years, and over that time he earns $1,350,000. That sounds like a fortune, but the company he works for earns $20 million a year in profit, year after year. Over the same 3 decades, the company accumulates $600 million. The obedient employee clings to his steady income, believing it proves his loyalty was worth it. Yet the wealth created by his labor is multiplied hundreds of times and directed elsewhere. His obedience generates abundance, but for others, not himself. Now imagine a woman named Patricia. She entered the workforce with dreams of stability. She was careful, always dressed correctly, never questioned authority, and always smiled when managers entered the room. Patricia was rewarded with a steady paycheck and occasional compliments, but she noticed something strange. Those who advanced faster were not always the most obedient. They were the ones willing to take risks, to challenge ideas, to sometimes disobey. Patricia's devotion made her dependable, but it did not make her powerful. Her obedience bought her predictability, but it denied her growth. She reached retirement with modest savings, proud of her loyalty but regretful of her silence. The price she paid was invisible until it was too late. Obedience is not free. It demands that you suppress your creativity, because creativity disrupts rules. It demands that you ignore injustice, because speaking out threatens authority. It demands that you limit your dreams, because dreams that do not fit the system cannot be pursued. Over time, you begin to lose not only opportunities, but also parts of yourself. You stop asking questions. Stop imagining alternatives. Stop believing you could be more. That loss is the highest cost of all, the erosion of belief in your own power. The system praises obedience because it needs it to survive. Companies cannot function if employees decide to walk away, to question, to resist. They rely on your willingness to obey even when it is against your interest. That is why obedience is dressed up as virtue and why disobedience is punished as rebellion. You are taught that following the rules makes you good, responsible, respectable. But what is praised in you is not for your benefit. It is for the benefit of those who profit from your compliance. Think of history itself. Every great breakthrough came not from obedience but from defiance. New industries were born because someone refused to accept limits. Wealth was created by those who dared to break the mold. If obedience truly led to prosperity, every loyal employee would be wealthy by now. But they are not. They are stable, predictable, replaceable. Wealth belongs to those who chose to step beyond obedience and build something of their own. When you recognize the price of obedience, you begin to see your choices differently. You no longer mistake loyalty for safety, nor obedience for virtue. You begin to ask yourself, what opportunities am I sacrificing to maintain this role? What freedom am I trading for predictability? What wealth am I creating for others while denying myself the same chance? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary. Without them, you remain a silent partner in your own captivity. The cost of obedience is not measured only in money. It is measured in dreams unfulfilled, ideas unspoken, and time irretrievably lost. Every day you obey without question, you surrender a piece of what could have been. That is a debt far greater than any paycheck can repay. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The illusion fades, and what remains is the raw truth. Obedience was never the road to wealth. It was a toll you paid to stay on someone else's road, headed towards someone else's destination. Obedience is praised so loudly in the workplace that you might mistake it for the greatest virtue. From your first day at a job, you are told to respect the hierarchy, to follow instructions carefully, to never rock the boat. You are rewarded when you comply and disciplined when you resist. At first, this feels natural. After all, structure is necessary for any organization to function. But beneath the surface, obedience becomes more than structure. It becomes a mechanism of control. The system does not merely want your compliance. It wants your submission. And submission has a cost that is rarely discussed. One of the hidden costs of obedience is stagnation. When you obey without question, you stop growing. Your skills are confined to the tasks assigned to you. You become excellent at repetition, but poor at innovation. You are trained to perfect the routine, not to imagine alternatives. Over time, this limits your value in the marketplace. You may believe you are advancing by staying loyal, but in truth, you are freezing in place. The years pass, and while your paycheck may rise slightly, your freedom does not. Take the example of Joseph, who worked for 22 years at a bank. He was obedient, respectful, and reliable. Each day he processed paperwork, approved loans, and ensured compliance with regulations. His managers loved him because he never challenged them. But when technology transformed the banking industry, Joseph's role became unnecessary. He was offered early retirement with a payout equal to 6 months of salary. After 2 decades of obedience, he was worth only $18,000 to the institution he had served faithfully. His obedience had been his prison, and when the walls collapsed, he had nothing of his own to stand upon. Obedience also carries a cost of dependence. The more you comply, the more you rely on the system to decide your path. Promotions, raises, and recognition are handed down like rewards for good behavior. You wait patiently, hoping to be chosen, but this dependence weakens you. You are like a child waiting for permission rather than an adult claiming authority over your own life. The more dependent you become, the more powerless you feel. And the powerless cannot build wealth, because wealth demands initiative, risk, and control. Consider numbers for a moment. Imagine you begin your career at age 22 earning $35,000 a year. You obey every instruction, never complain, and stay loyal to the company. Over 10 years, your salary rises to $50,000. Over 20 years, it reaches $60,000. Across those 2 decades, you have earned just over $1 million in total income. Now compare this with the owner of the company, whose annual profit is $3 million. In just 1 year, the owner earns 3 times what you've made in 20 years of obedience. The scale of imbalance is staggering, but it persists because obedience blinds you. You believe loyalty will one day close the gap. It never does. Another story reveals a different cost, the cost of silence. Think of Angela, a marketing assistant at a large firm. She had creative ideas for new campaigns, fresh strategies that could have brought millions in revenue. But Angela was told to know her place. Her job was to follow the instructions of her manager, not to innovate. She obeyed. For years, her ideas stayed locked inside her mind while the company struggled with outdated strategies. By the time leadership finally noticed her potential, Angela was exhausted and bitter. She left without savings, her creativity wasted in service of obedience. The cost here was not only financial. It was a loss of contribution, the loss of purpose, the loss of the chance to shape her own destiny. The system disguises obedience as security. You are told that following the rules ensures stability, while questioning authority risks everything. But the truth is inverted. Stability does not come from compliance. It comes from ownership. When you own assets, businesses, or skills that no one can take away, you are stable. When you merely obey, your fate rests entirely in the hands of others. That is not stability. That is vulnerability. The disguise fools many because the paycheck arrives consistently, and consistency feels like safety. But consistency without control is just repetition. There is also the psychological price of obedience. Each time you swallow your thoughts to keep the peace, a small part of your confidence erodes. Each time you accept unfair treatment in exchange for a paycheck, your dignity weakens. Over years, this creates a quiet despair. You begin to believe you are incapable of more, that your role is fixed, that your dreams were childish illusions. The paycheck soothes the pain, but the pain remains. This is why so many employees feel trapped, not only financially, but emotionally. The obedience they believed would bring peace has instead brought emptiness. And yet, society continues to glorify obedience. Schools reward students for sitting still, for memorizing rather than questioning. Families celebrate children who get good jobs and keep them for life. Churches, governments, and institutions all repeat the same refrain: obey, and you will be safe. The world teaches you that questioning authority is dangerous, that taking risks is reckless, that independence is selfish. And so you obey, because to disobey feels like betrayal. But betrayal of what? Of whom? When you look closely, you see that obedience only ever served those in power, never you. Let us consider another numeric picture. Imagine an employee who stays loyal to a company for 30 years. He earns a pension that promises $2,000 per month. He believes this is a reward for his obedience. Yet in those 3 decades, the profits of the company exceeded $1 billion. His portion, after a lifetime of loyalty, is $24,000 a year in retirement. That sum is not wealth. It is survival. His obedience purchased survival, while others purchase freedom. The final cost of obedience is generational. When you obey, you model obedience for your children. They grow up believing that stability comes from following orders rather than creating value. They inherit your mindset, your limitations, your fears. The cycle continues. Generations trade freedom for paychecks, believing they are being responsible, when in reality they are passing down chains disguised as safety. The true inheritance you want to leave is not obedience, but ownership, not dependency, but power. Once you see the full price of obedience, stagnation, dependence, silence, vulnerability, despair, and generational limitation, you cannot deny its weight. You realize that the reward of loyalty is far smaller than the wealth of freedom. And you begin to ask yourself the essential question: am I willing to keep paying this price, or will I step into the risk of independence? The answer is not easy, but clarity never is. What matters is that you see the price clearly, for only then can you choose wisely. Chapter 3. The Machinery of Profit. When you walk into your workplace each morning, you may not realize it, but you are stepping into a machine. Every wall, every desk, Every policy has been designed to extract value from your time. You imagine you are there to earn a living, but in reality, you are there to multiply someone else's fortune. The machinery of profit is subtle, efficient, and relentless. It consumes your hours, your skills, and even your creativity, and it transforms them into wealth that flows upward. You are a vital cog in the system, yet you are rewarded only enough to keep you turning. This machine runs on one simple principle: buy labor at a discount and sell the results at a premium. You are paid less than the value you create. Always, if you were paid the full worth of your labor, there would be nothing left for the owners, and the system would collapse. Imagine you generate $100 an hour in value for your company. You are paid $25. The remaining $75 goes elsewhere, to cover costs, yes, but mostly to deliver profit to those who do not labor as you do. That is how the machinery functions, by ensuring that the creators of value are never the ones who keep it. Think of a restaurant. A waiter earns $2,000 a month. Each evening, he serves tables that collectively bring in $4,000 in revenue. In a single night, he generates twice his monthly salary. Multiply this by 30 nights, and the waiter produces $120,000 of revenue per month for the business. His share remains $2,000. The difference flows upward to pay suppliers, to cover expenses, and finally to enrich the owner. The machinery is not unfair by accident. It is unfair by design. Another example makes the gears even clearer. Imagine a technology firm with 200 employees. Each employee earns an average salary of $60,000 per year. That equals $12 million in labor costs. The company, however, generates $50 million in annual revenue, leaving $38 million after wages are paid. From that, shareholders take dividends, executives take bonuses, and the company reinvests in growth. The employees who produce the revenue receive no share of that wealth beyond their fixed salaries. They have traded dynamic value for static income. The machine spins, and they remain at the bottom, turning the gears that make others rich. The machinery also relies on scale. The more workers inside the system, the greater the profits for those at the top. Consider the global apparel industry. A factory worker in Bangladesh may earn $100 per month. That same worker produces clothing sold in New York for $50 per piece. In a single day, she can sew garments worth several $1,000s at retail price. Her wage barely covers food, while the brand earns millions. The machine grows fat not from innovation, but from the obedience and labor of millions of unseen hands. But the most cunning part of machinery is that it convinces you to be grateful. You see your paycheck as a blessing, not realizing that it is only a fraction of the value you produced. Gratitude keeps the gears well-oiled. You are thankful for employment, thankful for benefits, thankful for stability, while the system quietly converts your energy into profit streams you will never touch. The illusion is not simply that you are safe. It is that you are rewarded fairly. In truth, fairness has nothing to do with it. The machinery is not designed for fairness. It is designed for extraction. Consider Michael, a young man who worked in sales. Each year, he brought in nearly $1 million in contracts for his company. His commission was 5%. He earned $50,000, while $950,000 flowed upward. Michael convinced himself he was lucky. $50,000 was more than many people earned. But luck had nothing to do with it. Michael was the engine, yet he received crumbs compared to the banquet his labor produced. This is how the machine rewards you. Just enough to keep you from leaving, but never enough to make you free. The machinery of profit is not inherently evil. It is efficient. It is logical. But it is not built with your freedom in mind. It is built to perpetuate itself, to keep owners wealthy and workers dependent. And the machine is patient. It will run for decades, consuming generation after generation, so long as people continue to believe that their only option is to enter its gears. The moment you question it, you see the truth. The wealth you create is not yours because the structure was designed that way from the beginning. This structure is visible in every industry. In hospitals, doctors and nurses work exhausting shifts, saving lives. Yet the largest profits go to pharmaceutical companies, insurance providers, and hospital executives. In education, Teachers pour their energy into shaping futures, while private institutions accumulate wealth from tuition and fees. In transportation, drivers move goods across continents, but the real fortunes are captured by the corporations that own the networks. Everywhere you look, the story is the same. Labor creates, ownership captures. To see the machinery clearly, you must follow the flow of money. Do not look only at what you earn. Look at what your work produces. Trace it upward, and you will see how much disappears before it reaches you. When you see that, the illusion of fairness begins to dissolve. You no longer confuse effort with reward or labor with wealth. You see the system for what it is, a design that takes from the many to enrich the few. And once you see the design, you can begin to imagine stepping outside of it, building a structure of your own where the gears turn in your favor. The machinery of profit is relentless, but it is not invincible. It cannot trap you once you see how it functions. What makes it powerful is your ignorance. The moment you awaken, the moment you realize you are producing far more than you are receiving, the gears begin to loosen. The question then becomes not whether you should remain inside the machine, but whether you are willing to build one of your own. The machinery of profit does not survive by force alone. It survives by shaping the way you think. It whispers that you are fortunate to have a job, that your salary is fair, that others would gladly take your place. It tells you that the company is your family, that your loyalty will be rewarded, that if you remain patient, your turn will come. These whispers are not innocent. They are gears in the machine. They ensure that you remain obedient while your labor is harvested and transformed into wealth for others. Every aspect of your working life is engineered to maximize extraction. Your hours are calculated, your output measured, your performance reviewed. Nothing is left to chance. The company does not ask, how can this person flourish? It asks, how can this person produce more value than they cost? That is the formula. As long as your output exceeds your wage, the machine runs profitably. The wider the gap, the greater the wealth for those at the top. And because most employees never question this formula, it continues without resistance. Let us take the example of a call center. Each employee earns $2,000 a month. There are 500 employees, so the total wage bill is $1 million. But these employees collectively handle 50,000 calls, generating $5 million in contracts and renewals. The company spends $1 million to generate $5 million. For million remains after wages. Even after expenses, the owners pocket millions in profit. The workers celebrate payday, grateful for their checks, never realizing that the real fortune flows past them. This is how the machinery keeps them blind. By giving just enough to satisfy, but never enough to liberate. The machine also manipulates your perception of effort. You are told that hard work is noble, that long hours prove your worth, that sacrifice today guarantees success tomorrow. But in truth, hard work benefits the system more than it benefits you. The longer you work, the more value you produce, and the greater the surplus extracted. If hard work alone created wealth, the hardest working people on earth would be the richest. Yet the opposite is true. Farm laborers, factory workers, and cleaners work harder than most, yet remain poor. Why? Because the machinery is designed to capture the fruits of labor and deliver them upward. Consider a factory where employees work 12-hour shifts assembling electronics. Each device sells for $300. An experienced worker can assemble 20 devices in a day, producing $6,000 of goods. The worker's wage for that day is $50. 50 against 6,000. The numbers reveal the truth more starkly than any speech. The machine exists to ensure that the majority of value created never reaches the hands that created it. Another cost of the machinery is invisibility. As an employee, your individual contribution dissolves into the whole. You may have an idea that saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars, but your reward is limited to a pat on the back or, at best, a small raise. Ownership, on the other hand, receives the full reward of your idea multiplied across years and markets. Your brilliance becomes their profit. This invisibility robs you not only of wealth but of recognition. You become faceless, interchangeable, a cog that can be replaced whenever the machine demands it. Think of Sophia, a young engineer who worked at a technology startup. She designed a feature that revolutionized the company's software, attracting clients worth millions. Her salary remained $70,000 a year. The founders sold the company for $200 million. Sophia received a plaque of appreciation. Her design had fueled the machine, but because she had no ownership, the fortune she created was not hers. The machinery of profit had consumed her innovation and converted it into wealth that passed her by. The machine also thrives on distraction. To keep you from noticing how much value is taken, it offers perks. Free coffee, casual Fridays, company retreats. These are not gifts, they are diversions. They keep you comfortable enough to forget the imbalance. The machine knows that if you feel cared for, you will stop asking hard questions. So it feeds you small comforts while harvests your greatest resource, your time. Follow the flow of time, and you will see the clearest picture of all. Suppose you work 40 hours a week for 40 years. That is more than 80,000 hours of your life. During those hours, your energy fuels profits that accumulate in the accounts of owners and shareholders. At the end of those 40 years, you may have a retirement plan worth a few $100,000. Meanwhile, the machine has generated tens of millions from your labor. Your entire life has been consumed to power an engine that was never built for your benefit. And yet, the machine endures because it disguises itself as normal. Everyone around you is inside it. They tell you that this is simply the way the world works. They urge you to be grateful, to stop complaining, to stay in line. The system depends on this collective belief. As long as people accept the machine as natural, it can keep running endlessly. But once enough people begin to see its design, cracks appear. Doubt grows. Some step outside. They build their own machines, small at first, but each one a rebellion against a larger system. The machinery of profit is not invincible, but it is relentless. It will not stop extracting value unless you step away from its gears. And stepping away begins with vision. You must see clearly that your labor is worth more than your wage, that your creativity is more valuable than your paycheck, that your time is too precious to be consumed without ownership. Only then do you begin to ask the right question. Not how you can climb higher inside the machine, but how you can build a machine of your own. When you understand the machinery, gratitude shifts. You no longer thank your employer for the crumbs. You thank yourself for the capacity to create. You stop mistaking dependence for safety. You begin to see your labor as a resource you can redirect. The machine may continue turning, but you no longer confuse it with destiny. You see it for what it is, a design built to enrich others, unless you choose otherwise. Governments need you to consume, so taxes increase. Entire economies are structured around your willingness to trade your freedom for possessions. The system does not merely tolerate your spending, it depends on it. And the more you spend, the stronger it becomes. The trap of consumption is one of the most effective tools ever created to keep employees from building wealth. Even those who earn high incomes often fall victim. They call it lifestyle inflation. As income rises, expenses rise equally, leaving savings stagnant. A doctor may earn $200,000 a year, yet remain broke, because her home, car, and lifestyle consume every dollar. A lawyer may bring in $500,000, yet be enslaved to debt and obligations. The trap is not about how much you earn. It is about how much you keep. And most people, no matter their income, keep very little. Freedom begins when you recognize the trap. You cannot escape what you do not see. The paycheck is not yours until you protect it. If you allow consumption to swallow it whole, then your labor has enriched everyone but you. To step outside the trap, you must shift your measure of success. Not by what you own, but by what you keep. Not by how much you spend, but by how much you control. Until that shift occurs, the trap will hold you tightly generation after generation, convincing you that spending is living, when in reality it is a slow erosion of freedom. Chapter 4. The Trap of Consumption. The moment you receive your paycheck, the trap begins to tighten. The money is barely in your account before it is pulled away by bills, rent, groceries, and debt payments. You tell yourself this is normal, this is life. But what you do not see is that this cycle is not an accident. It is designed. The system does not merely want your labor. It wants your spending. The trap of consumption is the second half of the machinery. ensuring that even the small share of wealth you do receive flows back into the hands of the wealthy. You are taught from childhood that consumption is proof of success. New clothes, a bigger house, the latest phone, these are held up as signs that you are moving forward. Advertisements surround you, whispering that your worth is measured by what you own. If you earn more, you are told to spend more. If you are promoted, you are told to upgrade your car. Each financial step upward is matched by new obligations, new expenses, new temptations. And so, even as your income grows, your freedom does not. The trap ensures that you remain dependent, always chasing, never arriving. Consider the story of David. He worked as a mid-level manager earning $60,000 a year. On paper, this seemed like success. But each year as his salary increased, so did his lifestyle. When he received a raise, he bought a larger home. When he earned a bonus, he leased a luxury car. When he was promoted, he took on expensive vacations. David believed he was moving up, but in reality, he was standing still. His debts grew as fast as his salary. By the time he reached 50, he had earned more than $1 million over his career, but had less than $20,000 in savings. The trap of consumption had swallowed his progress. Numbers reveal the trap with brutal clarity. Imagine you earn $4,000 a month. You spend $3,500 on living costs, mortgage, car payments, insurance, food, entertainment. That leaves $500. You save a portion, but emergencies arise and the savings vanish. Over a year, you may set aside $2,000 at best. Meanwhile, the companies you purchase from, the bank that holds your mortgage, the car manufacturer, the insurance firm, are accumulating millions in profit. Your spending has enriched them, while your savings barely grow. You work to earn the paycheck, then spend it in ways that ensured others kept the wealth. The trap grows deeper because society rewards consumption. When you buy a new car, your neighbors admire you. When you wear expensive clothes, colleagues notice. You are applauded for spending, not for saving. This social reinforcement makes restraint feel like failure. People rarely celebrate the person who drives an old, reliable car to avoid debt. They celebrate the one who flaunts a new model, even if it is financed with loans. And so you learn to measure yourself by appearances, which keeps you locked inside the trap. Take Maria, for instance. She earned $45,000 a year as a teacher. She loved her work, but always felt pressure to keep up with her peers. When other teachers upgraded their phones, Maria did too. When they remodeled kitchens or bought new furniture, she followed. She wanted to belong, to show she was doing well. After 20 years of teaching, she looked back and realized she had almost nothing saved. The trap had disguised itself as belonging, but the price was her financial future. The trap of consumption also thrives on debt. Credit cards, car loans, student loans, mortgages. These are marketed as tools to improve your life, but in reality they are chains. Debt allows you to spend today what you will earn tomorrow, ensuring that your future income is already spoken for. You believe you own your possessions, but in truth, the bank owns them until the debt is cleared. Debt keeps you running faster and faster, yet never catching up. You are not consuming. You are being consumed. Consider a family earning $70,000 a year. They carry a mortgage of $200,000, a car loan of $30,000, and credit card debt of $10,000. Each month, nearly $2,000 goes to servicing debt. Over a decade, they will pay more than $200,000 in interest alone. That money could have been invested, compounding into wealth. Instead, it flows to banks and lenders, enriching them while the family remains trapped in dependency. The illusion of consumption is that it feels good in the moment. Buying brings pleasure, comfort, even status. But the long-term cost is invisible until it's too late. A new car loses half its value in 5 years. Clothes fade, gadgets break, vacations are forgotten. Yet the payments remain, dragging your future backward. You spend decades working not only for your employer, but also for your creditors. The system has trapped you on both sides. First by underpaying your labor, and then by teaching you to spend the little you earn in ways that enrich others. The tragedy of the trap is not only financial, it is emotional. When you measure your life by what you consume, you are never satisfied. There is always a newer phone, a bigger house, a nicer car. The finish line keeps moving, and you chase it endlessly. This creates anxiety, envy, and frustration. You feel as though you are working harder every year, but never arriving at freedom. The truth is that you are not failing. The system is working exactly as designed. But there is a deeper level still. The trap of consumption robs you of time. When you commit to higher expenses, you must keep working to cover them. If your mortgage requires 30 years of payments, you have bound yourself to 3 decades of labor. If your car loan stretches for 5 years, you have traded 5 years of freedom for a vehicle that will depreciate long before you finish paying for it. Every purchase carries hidden time, not just money. And so, each time you consume, you are also consuming your future. You may ask yourself, why does the system encourage this? The answer is simple. Consumption fuels profit. Companies need you to spend, so their revenues grow. Banks need you to borrow, so interest flows. If you want to understand why most employees never escape the cycle of dependency, you must look closely at the psychology of consumption. It is not only about money, it is about identity. The system has taught you that what you buy is who you are. A car is not transportation. It is a signal of status. A house is not shelter. It is a symbol of achievement. A watch is not a tool to measure time. It is a declaration of worth. And when identity is tied to consumption, you are trapped because no purchase can ever fully satisfy the hunger to be recognized, admired, or envied. Marketers know this better than anyone. They never sell you a product. They sell you a story. A car commercial does not show the mechanics of the engine. It shows freedom, adventure, respect. A clothing advertisement does not display fabric. It displays confidence, desirability, belonging. You are not buying items. You are buying illusions. And every time you trade money for those illusions, you reinforce the trap. You give away your wealth in exchange for symbols that fade quickly, leaving you hungry for more. Take the story of Jonathan, a young professional who earned $70,000 a year. He grew up without much, so when he began earning well, he wanted to prove his success. He purchased a luxury car, designer suits, and rented a high-rise apartment. His friends admired him, and for a while, he felt powerful. But beneath the surface, debt grew. Monthly payments consumed his salary. He was working not for freedom, but for appearances. Jonathan had mistaken image for reality. By the time he realized the trap, he had spent nearly a decade running on a treadmill that led nowhere. Numbers make the trap even clearer. Imagine a worker who spends $300 a month on dining out, $200 on streaming subscriptions and entertainment, $400 on car payments, and $1,000 on rent or mortgage. Add utilities, groceries, insurance, and you easily reach $3,000 in expenses. If that worker earns $3,500, only $500 remains. Over 12 months, $6,000 could have been invested, but instead, the $6,000 disappears on small upgrades, gadgets, and experiences that fade within days. Over 30 years, the difference is staggering. With compounding, those $6,000 per year could have grown into nearly $1 million. Instead, they are gone, leaving nothing behind. That is the true cost of consumption. Not the dollars spent, but the wealth that never had a chance to grow. Debt plays a cruel role in deepening the trap. Credit cards promise convenience, but deliver chains. A simple purchase of $1,000 can balloon into $2,000 or $3,000 with interest if left unpaid. Lenders count on this. They know many employees live paycheck to paycheck, unable to clear balances. Debt is not a mistake in the system. It is the system. It ensures that the little wealth you earn flows back to banks and creditors, keeping you enslaved long after the moment of pleasure has passed. Consider Emily, a nurse who worked long shifts and earned $55,000 a year. Tired after work, she often ordered food instead of cooking. Small charges of $20 became hundreds each month. When she could not cover it, she used credit cards. Within 5 years, she had accumulated $12,000 in credit card debt. The interest alone cost her over $2,000 each year. She was not paying for meals anymore. She was paying for past mistakes. The trap had her locked. What felt like comfort in the moment became a burden that stole her future. Another layer of the trap is comparison. You may not desire luxury until you see it in someone else's hands. Social media magnifies this pressure. You scroll through endless images of vacations, cars, weddings, and homes. You are shown the highlight reels of others, and you feel compelled to match them. To say no feels like falling behind. But this race has no finish line. Each time you catch up, the goalposts move. Comparison fuels consumption, and consumption feeds a machine. The tragedy is that even high earners are not immune. Doctors, lawyers, executives, many live in golden cages. They earn six figures but spend nearly all of it on mortgages, cars, private schools, and luxury vacations. Their incomes impress others, but their savings are thin. They are rich in appearance but poor in freedom. This is why surveys often reveal that even people earning $200,000 a year feel financially strained. The trap scales upward. No matter how much you earn, if you spend it all, you remain a servant to the system. And so the cycle continues. Work to earn, spend to prove, borrow to maintain, and work again to pay it back. Decades pass, and you find yourself wondering why freedom never arrived. The trap of consumption has consumed your time, your energy, and your wealth. You live not for yourself, but for creditors, companies, and expectations. But the greatest cost of the trap is invisible. It is the opportunity cost of what you never built. The dollars spent on fleeting pleasures could have been seeds planted into assets. The hours traded for debt repayment could have been hours spent creating, innovating, or investing. The years devoted to consumption could have been years devoted to ownership. The trap steals not only your wealth, but your possibility. Think again of the family that spends $4,000 a month, earning only slightly more. If, instead, they learn to live on $3,000, the extra $1,000 invested over 30 years could have grown into more than $2 million. That is not a fantasy. It is simple mathematics. Yet, most will never see it, because the trap blinds them. They are too focused on today's purchases to imagine tomorrow's wealth. The machine counts on this blindness. It does not need to steal from you directly. It only needs to teach you to consume willingly. Freedom from the trap begins with awareness. The first act of rebellion is to stop measuring your success by what you spend. Wealth is not the car in your driveway or the clothes in your closet. Wealth is the time you control, the choices you own, the future you secure. Until you redefine wealth, you will remain captive. The trap is strong not because it holds your money, but because it holds your mind. Once you see that, you begin to loosen its grip. Chapter 5. The Lost Power of Ownership. For centuries, ownership has been a dividing line between those who remain dependent and those who achieve freedom. Landowners, merchants, and later industrialists, all of them built wealth not because they worked harder than others, but because they owned the structures through which others worked. Ownership has always been the secret ingredient. Yet it is the very thing most employees never attain. They labor for decades. Yet at the end of their careers, they own nothing but memories and a pension check that barely sustains them. The power of ownership has been hidden from them, and in losing it, they lose the possibility of true wealth. When you are an employee, you may believe your greatest asset is your skill or your discipline. But skills alone, without ownership, are rented out cheaply. You are selling hours of your life, and once sold, they are gone forever. Ownership, on the other hand, multiplies itself. A single share in a company can generate dividends year after year. A small property can yield rental income for decades. A business can operate long after you have left the office. Ownership does not consume your time. It expands it. That is why those who own control the future, while those who do not remain chained to the present. Consider the example of Henry, who worked as a mechanic for 35 years. He earned a steady wage, enough to support his family, but never invested in ownership. He rented his home, drove cars financed by loans, and put small amounts into savings accounts that paid little interest. By the time he retired, Henry had nothing that produced income for him. Every dollar he lived on came from government benefits and small withdrawals from savings. He had worked his entire life, yet owned nothing that could continue working for him. His labor enriched others, the garage owner, the banks, the landlords, but it left him with almost nothing. Now compare Henry to Robert, who also worked as a mechanic. Robert earned roughly the same salary, but made one crucial decision. He bought the small shop he worked in after 5 years. The shop required effort, sacrifice, and long hours, but ownership gave him leverage. He could hire apprentices, expand services, and eventually open a second location. After 20 years, Robert no longer worked under the hood every day. His shops generated profits, even when he took time off. By retirement, Robert owned real estate and a business that continued to produce income. The difference between Henry and Robert was not skill, it was ownership. Numbers clarify the point. Suppose you work 40 hours a week earning $50,000 a year. Over 40 years, you earn $2 million. That may seem significant, but remember, it is consumed by taxes, bills, and the trap of consumption. Now imagine instead that you own an asset, a small apartment building with 10 units. Each tenant pays $1,000 per month. That is $10,000 in monthly income, $120,000 per year. Even after expenses, you may keep $70,000. Over 40 years, the income surpasses $2 million, and the building itself appreciates in value. By the end of your career, the building might be worth several $1,000,000. The same decade of time produced vastly different outcomes. Not because one person worked harder, but because one person owned and the other did not. The system rarely encourages you to think this way. Schools do not teach ownership. They teach employment. They prepare you to enter the workforce, not control it. Employers do not encourage ownership. They encourage loyalty. They want you to focus on your job, not on building assets outside of it. Even families often pass down the mindset of stability rather than ownership. Get a good job. They say never own a piece of the world. And so generation after generation is trained to accept wages instead of demanding equity. This absence of ownership is why so many employees feel powerless. Without ownership, you cannot influence decisions. You cannot shape the future. You cannot protect yourself from sudden dismissal. Ownership gives you a seat at the table. Without it, you remain outside, waiting for crumbs. The wealthy understand this, which is why they hold assets in every form: stocks, businesses, real estate, patents. These assets generate income while they sleep, multiplying wealth across years and even generations. Employees, meanwhile, wake up each morning knowing that if they do not trade hours for wages, nothing comes in. That dependency is the cost of lost ownership. Consider Maria, a dedicated teacher. For 30 years, she shaped young lives, earning respect and gratitude. Yet financially, she remained stuck. Her salary was steady, but left little room for saving. She rented her home and never invested beyond a retirement plan controlled by her employer. Her life was meaningful, but financially fragile. Contrast her with Angela, who also taught for 30 years but chose to buy 2 small rental properties along the way. The rent checks covered her mortgage payments, and by the time she retired, the properties were fully paid off. Angela's pension was the same as Maria's, but Angela also had rental income every month. She owned something that produced wealth without her daily presence. Ownership gave her freedom that Maria never experienced. The tragedy is that most employees underestimate the cost of not owning. They think in terms of wages, but forget to measure what they are missing. If you spend 30 years without owning, you miss 30 years of compounding growth. You miss 3 decades of income streams that could have supported you. You miss a chance to pass down assets to your children. The absence of ownership is not neutral. It is a massive loss. It is a silent thief of wealth, stealing not what you have, but what you could have had. Ownership also transforms the way you see time. For employees, time is money in the most literal sense. Each hour equals a wage. For owners, time multiplies money. Assets generate wealth continuously, whether you're present or not. This is why the wealthy speak of making money work for you. They understand that the real power lies not in labor, but in leverage. When you own, your money and your assets labor on your behalf. When you do not own, you're the one laboring for someone else's assets. And yet, despite its obvious power, ownership feels out of reach to many. They believe it requires vast sums of money, perfect timing, or extraordinary intelligence. But ownership begins small. A few shares in a company, a modest piece of land, a side business nurtured in evenings and weekends. The scale is not the point. The principle is, the moment you own something that generates income beyond your wages, you shift from dependency to empowerment. You begin to reclaim the power that employees have lost for generations. The greatest tragedy of modern employment is not simply low wages or long hours. It is a quiet acceptance of a life without ownership. Ownership is not only about property or stocks. It is about power, control, and freedom. When you do not own, you are at the mercy of those who do. Every paycheck you earn is filtered through structures built by owners, landlords, corporations, banks. They decide the terms, they set the prices, and they determine your limits. Without ownership, your life is lived on borrowed ground. Think of the simplest example. Housing. If you rent your home, you are financing someone else's wealth. Each payment you make is not an investment in your future, but a contribution to theirs. Over 30 years, you may pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to a landlord, yet own nothing at the end. If, instead, you had owned, even modestly, you would have built equity that could support you in retirement or be passed down to your children. Ownership transforms the same monthly expense into a path toward freedom. Without it, the years vanish, and you are left with nothing but receipts. Consider Thomas, who worked diligently as a nurse for 40 years. He earned steady income, paid his rent faithfully, and lived a modest life. But when he retired, his only income was a pension barely sufficient for basic needs. He had nothing extra, no assets, no equity, no leverage. Meanwhile, his landlord had grown wealthy from decades of rent. Thomas had been loyal and hard-working, but without ownership, he had been building someone else's empire all along. Now compare him to Olivia, also a nurse. She bought a small apartment in her late 20s, making sacrifices to cover the mortgage. She lived simply, avoided unnecessary debt. And after 15 years, the property was fully hers. Later she bought another, renting it out for extra income. By the time she retired, she owned 2 properties that provided steady cash flow. Her pension was the same as Thomas's, but her life was different. She traveled, helped her grandchildren, and never feared running out of money. The difference was not career, intelligence, or effort. It was ownership. Numbers make this clearer still. Imagine you invest $200 each month in shares of a company. Over 30 years, with average growth, that investment could grow into more than $300,000. The same $200 is spent on dining out or subscription services, disappears with no return. The money is gone and the opportunity with it. The act of ownership, even in small amounts, creates a compounding effect that wages alone can never match. Each dollar owned becomes a worker on your behalf, generating returns while you live your life. The system does not want you to think about ownership. It distracts you with consumption, convinces you that small raises are victories, and trains you to measure success by promotions rather than equity. Employers rarely offer employees a share of the company because they understand the power of ownership. They prefer that you remain focused on wages, for wages keep you dependent. True freedom comes only when you cross the line from labor to owner. But ownership is not only financial, it is also mental. When you own, you think differently. You begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles. You stop asking, how much does this pay? And start asking, what does this build? Ownership shifts your horizon from weeks to decades. It teaches patience, foresight, and resilience. These are qualities employees rarely develop because their lives are measured in pay periods. But owners must think further. And in doing so, they unlock levels of growth that wages cannot buy. Ownership also creates legacy. Wages die with you, but assets live on. When you leave a business, land, or investments to your children, you pass down more than money. You pass down power. They inherit streams of income, leverage, and freedom. Contrast this with the employee who works for 50 years and leaves behind nothing but memories. His children begin again at zero, trapped in the same cycle of dependency. Ownership breaks that cycle. It plants seeds that grow beyond your lifetime. Take the story of Michael, who drove a taxi for 30 years. He earned just enough to cover living expenses. He dreamed of leaving something to his children, but retired with little savings. When he passed away, his family mourned his life but inherited none of his work. His decades of labor vanished with him. Now compare that to Samuel, who also drove a taxi but saved diligently to buy 2 additional vehicles. He rented them out to other drivers, generating income even when he was not behind the wheel. By the time he retired, he owned a small fleet. When Samuel passed, his children inherited the vehicles and the business. His decades of work continued to provide for them. Ownership turned his labor into a legacy. This is a lost power of ownership, the ability to multiply your labor across time and across generations. Employees are taught to believe they can achieve stability without it, but stability without ownership is an illusion. A pension, a savings account, or a government benefit cannot replace the leverage of assets. Ownership is the difference between surviving and thriving, between dependency and freedom. Yet many employees shy away from ownership because they fear risk. They say, "What if I lose money?" But they fail to see that the greatest risk is to never own it all. To rely solely on wages is to guarantee that your wealth ends when your labor ends. Ownership may carry uncertainty, but also carries possibility. Without it, the outcome is certain: dependency until death. You must understand that the cost of not owning is greater than the risk of owning. Every year you delay, you lose compounding growth. Every paycheck spent fully on consumption is a lost opportunity to build equity. Ownership is not something you begin when you're wealthy. It is the reason you become wealthy. The first step may be small, but the power lies not in size. It lies in the principle. Once you begin to own, you shift the balance. You reclaim the power that employees have surrendered for generations. The truth is simple but profound. Wages may feed you today, but ownership feeds you forever. Ownership gives you income, security, legacy, and freedom. Without it, you are always building for someone else. With it, you begin to build for yourself. That is a lost power you must rediscover if you wish to escape the endless cycle of dependency. Chapter 6. Choosing a different path. At some point, you must face the question that has been silently waiting beneath every paycheck, every hour worked, every bill paid. Will you continue building wealth for others, or will you choose a different path? For years, you may have believed there was no choice, that the life of an employee was the only path available. But the truth is that choice has always been yours. The system may discourage it. Society may doubt it. Even your family may fear it. But freedom has always been an option. It begins not with money, but with vision, the courage to imagine life beyond dependency. Choosing a different path means first rejecting the illusions you were taught. The illusion that wages equal safety, that obedience equals virtue, that consumption equals success, and that ownership is out of reach. These are lies woven into the fabric of your upbringing, repeated so often they feel like truth. But truth is not what you are told. It is what you discover when you look closely at results. And the results are clear. Those who cling to wages end with little, while those who claim ownership and independence build legacies. If you want to escape, you must begin by unlearning. Take the example of Jacob. For years, he worked in a corporate office, earning $65,000 annually. He believed this was success until he realized that despite a decade of labor, he had almost no savings. One night, sitting at his kitchen table, he asked himself the question he had avoided for years. Am I building wealth for myself or own for others? That question changed everything. Jacob began saving small amounts, reducing expenses, and studying investing. He bought shares in companies, started a small side business, and within 5 years had assets that produced passive income. He was still employed, but for the first time, he was building for himself. His transformation began not with money, but with a decision to choose a different path. Numbers again reveal the power of that choice. Imagine 2 people earning $50,000 per year. One spends nearly everything, saving only 2% annually. The other decides to live with discipline, saving 20%. Over 30 years, assuming modest growth, the disciplined saver could accumulate more than $1 million, while the spender ends with little more than fleeting possessions. Both worked the same jobs, both earned the same wages, but one chose a different path, and the outcome was entirely different. The path of freedom is not glamorous at first. It may mean driving an older car, while others lease new models. It may mean renting out a room to save for a property. It may mean spending weekends building a side hustle while others relax. These sacrifices are not punishment. They are seeds. Every dollar you save, every asset you acquire, every skill you develop outside your job is a step away from dependency. The world may not applaud you at first. Friends may not understand. Family may worry. But freedom is rarely celebrated in its early stages. It is only admired once it blooms. Consider Sarah, a school administrator who grew tired of living paycheck to paycheck. She began baking cakes on weekends, selling them to neighbors and friends. At first, she earned only a few $100s each month, but she reinvested, improved her skills, and grew her business. Within 5 years, her cake business surpassed her salary. She left her job and focused on her company full-time. Today, she owns a bakery, employing several people. The path looked small at the beginning, almost trivial, but was a path she chose. Sarah's wealth and independence came not from waiting for permission, but from deciding to act. The choice to build a different path also requires courage to face uncertainty. The paycheck feels safe because it is predictable. Starting something new feels dangerous because results are uncertain. But safety without growth is a cage, and risk without ownership is slavery. The only way to escape is to accept that uncertainty is the price of freedom. Every entrepreneur, every investor, every owner has faced it. The difference is that they were willing to pay that price while others were not. It is important to understand that choosing a different path does not always mean abandoning your job immediately. It means redirecting your energy. You can remain employed while you build assets on the side. You can use your wages as a tool to buy ownership rather than as fuel for consumption. You can begin small, growing gradually until the weight shifts from dependency to independence. The path does not require reckless leaps. It requires consistent steps. Freedom begins the moment you decide that your future will not be built solely on wages. It begins when you shift your focus from what you can buy today to what you can build for tomorrow. It begins when you stop asking, "How do I earn more?" and start asking, "How do I own more?" That shift changes everything. You no longer see yourself as a cog in someone else's machine, but as the builder of your own. Look again at the stories we have seen throughout history. Farmers who owned their land passed wealth to their children, while those who rented remained poor. Merchants who owned ships built dynasties, while sailors earned wages and vanished into obscurity. Industrialists who owned factories became legends, while workers who built those factories retired with little more than pensions. The pattern is universal. Ownership defines the path of freedom. Wages, no matter how high, define the path of dependency. The decision is yours. You can continue as you are, trading hours for survival, building wealth for others. Or you can choose differently. You can choose to live with discipline, to invest in ownership, to create streams of income that no employer controls. You can choose the harder path today for the sake of a freer tomorrow. The system will not encourage you. The world may not understand. But freedom is never given. It is chosen. And the moment you decide, you step onto a path that leads not to survival, but to abundance. Choosing a different path does not mean rejecting work. It means redefining the purpose of your work. Instead of working only to pay bills and survive until the next paycheck, you work to build something that endures. Your labor becomes fuel for ownership, for assets, for freedom. You stop being only an employee and begin to act as an investor in your own future. This is a shift that transforms lives. The moment when work is no longer the end, but the means. The challenge is that the world around you will resist this choice. People close to you may not understand. They may tell you that it is risky, that you should be grateful for what you have, that chasing independence is selfish or reckless. But remember this. Every person who has ever stepped into freedom has faced the same doubts. The difference between those who remain dependent and those who achieve independence is not intelligence or luck. It is the courage to continue despite resistance. Consider Daniel, who worked as a delivery driver. He earned modest wages but decided he wanted more for his family. He began saving a small portion each week, even when it felt impossible. With that money, he bought a used truck and started offering his own delivery services on weekends. At first, the income was small, but over time, his business grew. Within 5 years, Daniel left his job and ran a fleet of trucks. His friends had laughed when he began, calling him foolish for giving up weekends. But when they were still working for wages, and Daniel was employing drivers of his own, the laughter stopped. Daniel chose a different path, and the difference compounded over time. The compounding effect of small decisions is what makes this path so powerful. Saving a little each month, investing consistently, building a side project, all of these may seem insignificant at first. But wealth is not built in sudden leaps. It is built in steady accumulation. Imagine saving $500 a month. Over 1 year, it is $6,000. Over 10 years with growth, it could be nearly $100,000. Over 30 years, it could surpass $600,000. That is the power of discipline multiplied by time. The person who chooses consumption will have nothing, but the person who chooses ownership will have freedom. But choosing a different path is not only about money, it is about time. Employees often live lives where their hours belong to others. Wake up, commute, work, return home, repeat. The days blur into decades. By the time retirement arrives, much of life has already passed. Freedom is not just about having wealth. It is about reclaiming your time while you still have strength and dreams. Ownership is the only vehicle that allows this. When your assets work for you, time begins to open. You no longer need to trade every hour for survival. You can choose what to do, when to do it, and with whom. That is the essence of freedom. Another story shows this vividly. Hannah worked as a graphic designer in a large agency. She was talented, creative, and driven, but her wages kept her trapped. She decided to start freelancing in her spare time, building her own client list. At first, she worked longer hours, balancing her job and her side business. But within 3 years, her freelance income surpassed her salary. She left the agency and became her own boss. With ownership of her work, Hannah no longer asked permission for vacations, raises, or projects. She chose. The freedom was not only financial, it was personal. She had reclaimed her life. The path you choose today will echo into your future. If you continue as you are, you will likely reach the end of your career with little to show beyond memories of labor. If you choose differently, even in small ways, the compounding effect will transform your life. The difference between the two paths is not visible in days or months. It becomes visible in years and decades. And by then, it is too late to go back. That is why the decision must be made now. The greatest obstacle to choosing differently is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss. But what you must remember is that dependency is the greatest failure of all. To reach the end of life knowing you built well for others but none for yourself, that is the true tragedy. Losses along the way are not failures. They are lessons. Every entrepreneur, every investor, every owner has faced them. But those who persist, who continue choosing differently despite setbacks, are the ones who escape. There is also the question of legacy. What will you leave behind? Wages end when you do, but ownership endures. A business, a property, an investment portfolio, these can be passed to children and grandchildren. They can lift entire generations out of dependency. Imagine working not only for your own freedom, but for the freedom of those who come after you. That is the power of choosing differently. You are not only changing your life, you are rewriting the destiny of your family. The world does not need more obedient employees. It needs more free individuals who dare to build, to own, to create. By choosing a different path, you join a minority who see clearly what others ignore. You refuse to be blinded by illusions. You reject dependency dressed as safety. You embrace responsibility, risk, and ownership. And in doing so, you reclaim the wealth that has always been within your reach. The decision will not be comfortable, but comfort is what kept you trapped. Freedom lives on the other side of discomfort. Each step away from dependency may feel uncertain, but it is a step toward truth. And the truth is simple. You were never meant to live your entire life building wealth for others. You were meant to build for yourself, for your family, for your future. The moment you decide, the path opens. It may be narrow at first, but it widens as you walk. And one day, you will look back and see that everything changed because you chose differently.